Hello everyone, welcome back to Let's Play Dragon Age Origins. As I said at the end of the last episode, this episode is going to be a codex entry, so if you do not want to sit here and listen to all of this, just skip ahead to the next episode if there's one waiting for you, and you won't miss any gameplay in this episode. Okay, without further ado, the Bow of the Golden Sun. You know what, hang on, I can hear my kids coming down the stairs. I think. Maybe not. Okay. Sorry, I heard somebody on the stairs. Maybe it was a cat. The Bow of the Golden Sun. There is no more famous ruler in history than Cordelius Drakon, first emperor of Orlais. Few, however, know the story of his empress. Empress... I'm going to say her name is pronounced Aria, but it looks like her name is Empress Aria. Was the third of Lord Montloris of Valchevan's famously unmarriageable 6 daughters. When she met young Prince Cordelius, she was the captain of her father's archers and led the defense of Loris Castle. She was not the fairest of ladies, nor the most elegant or charming, but Arya could shoot the wings off a bumblebee at 100 paces. By all accounts, when the prince witnessed that particular feat, Drakon, who was not noted for his charm or elegance, and rather better known for his sword and shield, was instantly smitten. On their wedding day, Drakon presented his bride with a golden bow crafted by the mages of Val Royeaux, so that they could ride into battle and spread the light of the Maker side by side. Cool. A couple of violent psychopaths married each other. The Summer Sword. In 884 Blessed, Lord Aurelian of Montsimard, champion of the Grand Tourney of Ansburg, commissioned a sword for his youngest son, Louis, who aspired to the Chevaliers. Insisting that his boy have nothing but the best, Lord Aurelian sought out the most renowned mastersmith in the Orlesian Empire, Versen of Halam Shiral, who was, at that time, nearly 80, and begged the old man to make the blade. Versen refused. His sight was failing him, and he had no wish to come out of retirement. But Aurelian offered an exorbitant sum of gold, and eventually overcame the artisan's resistance. The old master labored for several months, folding steel, honing the edge to perfection. The resulting blade was as long as a man is tall, and sharp as the tongue of any noblewoman. Versen proclaimed it to be his greatest work, and named it, in a fit of irony, the Summer Sword, since he had crafted it in the winter of his lifetime. Lord Aurelian brought Louis with him to receive the sword from the hand of the old master. When the boy saw the Summer Sword, he turned up his nose at his father's gift. Such great two-handed blades were no longer in fashion at court. He preferred an estoc. Presuming that's how you pronounce that. I know I'm familiar with the type of weapon, I'm just not sure if I'm pronouncing the name correctly. Aurelian was mortified. He insisted that Louis carry the blade and apologized to Versen, but to no avail. The swordsmith cursed the boy, saying that for his pride, regardless of blade he carried, he would fail anyway. Louis was eventually knighted, and joined the ranks of the Chevaliers. In 898 Blessed, he was appointed command of the Chevaliers in Denerim, and hoped to make a name for himself. And so he did. He was the most detested Chevalier in Ferelden, well known for his acts of depravity. In 9-1 Dragon, he met Logain MacTyr in battle at Avanash. Louis lost his estoc early in the fighting, became separated from his men, and ended up facing down Logain himself, armed only with the Summer Sword, which he had never before drawn. Practice might have saved him where pride did not. Logain made short work of the pompous Chevalier, and took the greatsword as a trophy. It's a cool story. Culture and history. Antiva. Some of these the codex entries end up being marked as unread when you gain some addendum to them. So I apologize in advance if I'm rereading anything I've already read. This one's so short, though, that I don't think that I've read this one before. In the rest of the civilized world, it is common belief that Antiva has no king. I assure you, gentle readers, that this is untrue. The line of kings in Antiva has remained unbroken for 2,500 years. It is simply that nobody pays any attention to them whatsoever. The nation is ruled in truth by a collection of merchant princes. They are not princes in the literal sense, but heads of banks, trading companies, and vineyards. Their power is conferred strictly by wealth. But Antiva is not primarily renowned for its peculiar form of government, nor for its admittedly unparalleled wines. Antiva is known for the House of Crows. Since Antivans are well known for being good at everything but fighting, it is more than a little ironic that Antiva possesses the most deadly assassins in the world. Their fame is such that Antiva keeps no standing army. No king is willing to order his troops to assault her borders, and no general is mad enough to lead such an invasion. The attack would likely succeed, but its leaders would not see the day. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar, by Brother Genetivi. The Banorn. The central Ferelden Valley has always been a paradox. No single ban holds more than a few dozen leagues of farmland, yet together they govern a greater territory than all the Terrans and Arls combined. This collection of independent bans is known as the Banorn, and it is the heart of Ferelden politics. No person has ever sat upon the throne of Ferelden without first winning the approval of the Banorn. Queen Fion, who had the misfortune to take the throne in the 18th year of the Steel Age, wrote of the Banorn. There have been 3 wars this year fought over elopements, 5 fought over wool, and 1 started by an apple tree. It isn't even winter yet. Who would believe that these same bands, now trying so hard to kill one another, just last year united in to give me the crown? From Ferelden, Folklore and History, by Sister Petrine, Chantry Scholar. The City Elves. When the holy exalted march of the Dales resulted in the dissolution of the Elven Kingdom, leaving a great many elves homeless once again, the divine Renata the divine Renata the First declared that all lands loyal to the Chantry must give the elves refuge within their own walls. Considering the atrocities committed by the elves at Red Crossing, this was a great testament to the Chantry's charity. There was one condition, however. The elves were to lay aside their pagan gods and live under the rule of the Chantry. Some of the elves refused our goodwill. They banded together to form the Wandering Dalish Elves, keeping their old elven ways, and their hatred of humans, alive. To this day, Dalish elves still terrorize those of us who stray too close to their camps. Most of the elves, however, saw that it was wisest to live under the protection of humans. And so we took the elves into our cities and tried to integrate them. We invited them into our own homes and gave them jobs as servants and farmhands. Here, in Denerim, the elves even have their own quarter, governed by an elven keeper. Most have proven to be productive members of society. Still, a small segment of the elven community remains dissatisfied. These troublemakers and malcontents roam the streets causing mayhem, rebelling against authority, and making a general nuisance of themselves. From Ferelden, Folklore and History, by Sister Petrine, Chantry Scholar. Alienage culture. Oh boy, really getting into it here. There have always been alienages. They have been around for as long as elves and shems have lived in the same lands. Ours isn't even the worst. They say that Val Royeaux has 10,000 elves living in a space no bigger than Denerim's market. Their walls are supposedly so high that daylight doesn't reach the Venedal until midday. But don't be so anxious to start tearing down the walls and picking fights with the guards. They keep out more than they keep in. We don't have to live here, you know. Sometimes a family gets a good break and they buy a house in the docks or the outskirts of town. If they're lucky, they come back to the alienage after the looters have burned their house down. The unlucky ones just go to the pauper's field. Here we're among family. We look out for each other. Here we do what we can to remember the old days. The flat ears who have gone out there, they're stuck. They'll never be human, and they've gone and thrown away being elven, too. So where does that leave them? Nowhere. Serethia, Haran of the High Ever Alienage. This is supposed to be about alienage culture, but it doesn't really say much about culture other than that, hey, if we all stick together, we're family, and we're treated like shit. I just don't know why it's called Alien Culture, specifically. Chapter 1, Chapter 2. Okay, so here we have Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. I'm pretty sure I didn't read Chapter 1 because I was waiting on Chapter 2. Let's see, what else? That might be it. I know there were other Chapter 1s as well. Yeah, let's wait. I'll probably never find Orzammar History Chapter 1, will I? Parval in the Occupied North. Oh, there's Venedal, Tree of the People. Okay, I thought that there were other chapter books I had avoided, but I'm not seeing them now. Anyway, since I don't think I read Chapter 1, I'll read it now. Ferelden, as we think of it now, did not exist before the Exalted Age. Instead, the valley was divided up into dozens of old Alamari clans. They warred constantly with one another over land, honor, the allegiance of the freeholders, and, on one notable occasion, the name given to a favorite Mabari. And then, in the 33rd year of the Exalted Age, Kalanhad Theron became Terran of Denerim, and everything changed. Most of what we know about the founding of our nation comes from old songs that the bards passed down through the ages. The songs are filled with wild exaggerations and outright lies, but this hardly differs from the scholarly papers of some of my contemporaries. Damn, throwing shade against his academic colleagues, huh? There is no agreement among poets or scholars on how he did it, but Kalanhad gained the support of the Circle of Magi, and they crafted for him a suit of silvery white armor that, by all accounts, repelled both arrow and blade. Kalanhad led his army across the valley and captured Redcliffe, one of only 3 men who ever successfully laid siege to that fortress, and presented himself to the bands of the Landsmeet as their king. The poets tell us that every lord knelt before Kalanhad without question. The fact that he attended the Landsmeet surrounded by ash warriors and loyal mages of the Circle is generally omitted from the ballads, however. From Kalanhad came the line of Theron kings and queens who reigned uninterrupted until the 44th year of the Blessed Age, when the Orlesian invasion came. The rightful king was forced to flee Denerim, and for 70 years a puppet sat upon the throne. From Ferelden, Folklore and History by Sister Patrine, Chantry Scholar. Okay, I'm sorry, I said it was a he that was throwing shade at his colleagues. It's actually Sister Patrine throwing shade at the scholarly papers of her contemporaries. Chapter 2, History of Ferelden. The occupation was a dark blot on Ferelden's history. Our people, who from time immemorial valued their freedom over all else, were forced to bow to Orlesian rule. The Empire declared our elves property and sold them like cattle. Chevaliers routinely plundered freeholds of coin, food, and even women and children, and excused it as taxation. And for 70 years no landsmeets were held, for the imperial throne had declared our ancient laws a form of treason. King Brandel was one of those who escaped. He tried to organize the other fugitive lords to retake their land, but Brandel was neither clever nor persuasive, and the nobles preferred to take their chances alone. Ferelden might still be little more than a territory of the Empire were it not for the fact that his daughter had all the charisma that her royal father lacked. The rebel queen's rule began with a midnight attack on the Imperial armory at Lothering. It was swift and successful, and with their pilfered arms, the rebels began a campaign against the Orlesians in earnest. But the turning point of the war came when a young freeholder joined the queen's army. The lad, Logain McTeer, possessed a remarkable talent for strategy, and quickly became the favorite advisor of young Prince Merrick. The queen finally died at the hands of Orlesian sympathizers anxious to curry favor with their painted masters, and Merrick took her place as the leader of the rebellion. Logain became Merrick's right hand. Merrick and Logain led the rebels in a new campaign against their Orlesian oppressors, culminating in the Battle of River Dane, where the last chevaliers in Denerim were crushed. With the capital once more in the hands of Fereldans, the battle to free our people was finally over, but the battle to rebuild what had been lost had only just begun. from Ferelden, Folklore and History by Sister Patrine, Chantry Scholar. Okay, so they mention King Brandil's wife was brilliant, and she had the charisma. The Rebel Queen, they call her, but they don't give her name. Did we learn her name in any other part of the Codex, and I've just forgotten it? It seems significant that they gave her a nickname and everything, but they don't tell us her real name. The other thought that I had on this was what? Oh, it's just a reminder, I guess, that Logain was a positive for Ferelden for years and years until suddenly he wasn't anymore. Also, it reminds me that Kalan was Merrick's son, and Logain was Merrick's best friend, right? So he killed his best friend, or he allowed to die at Ostagar, his best friend's son. Such a not bloodthirsty decision, but just such a callous one. Free Marches. The Free Marches are not a kingdom, nor even a nation in the most basic sense. People from that region dislike even being lumped together as marchers. Rather, they are a collection of independent city-states united only when it suits them. In this respect, they resemble the Banorn before the arrival of King Kalanhad. Because of this, the Free Marches have no capital, and what passes for a central government exists only sporadically, a sort of landsmeet that convenes only during times of crisis. I arrived in time for the grand tourney while it was on in Tantervale, a remarkable sight indeed. I saw Avar hillsmen test their mettle against Orlesian chevaliers, riders from the Anderfels buying Navaran cavalry horses, and Tevan craftsmen selling their wares to Deventer mages. All of Thedas was on display. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar by Brother Genetivi. Really quick, going to the map. Where's the map? I am wondering, so this is not about that Brother Genetivi's entry, this is about the history of Ferelden. So Orlais comes in, right? And this is where Orlais's up here somewhere, right? They invade from the west. I think they sent boats around and took Denerim, right? I think I remember reading that Denerim was taken by sea. So where did everybody go into exile? Did they come down here to the wilds? I thought it was interesting that in the story they said the Rebel Queen, one of the first attacks against the Orlesians was her effort to take over the armory at Lothering, which makes me think they must have been down here in the wilds in exile or something. And come up, so they kind of came up the same route that we did from the Qunari wilds and Ostagar. Anyway, let's see. Codex. Okay, that was the Free Marches. This is Gwaren, I'm going to say. The human settlement of Gwaren is built directly on top of a dwarven outpost by the same name. Prior to the First Blight, in a time when Ferelden was not yet a nation and was still carved up into barbarian tribes, the outpost served as a source of salt and a means by which the dwarves could reach the sea lanes of the Amaranthine Ocean. Unwilling to come to the surface, the dwarves made an agreement with the local Terran to build a port and relied on the humans to ferry goods between the ships and the underground outpost. This made Gwaren a prosperous place and extraordinarily wealthy for a time. When in the Divine Age the dwarven kingdoms fell to the Darkspawn and the deep roads were closed off, so too did the dwarves disappear from Gwaren. The human settlement, the envy of surrounding barbarian tribes, was assaulted and sacked, its wealth stolen. The town remained, however, and despite its remote location, continued to find value as a source of fish and timber. As the first settlement liberated by King Merrick and Logain during the Ferelden Rebellion, Gwaren was eventually granted to Logain when he became Terran in 911 Dragon. From Ferelden, Folklore and History by Sister Patrine, Chantry Scholar. I don't remember where this entry came from. It had something to do with, obviously, I think we unlocked it while we were in Denerim doing something, because it's about Logain and Merrick, but I don't think I've ever been to Gwaren. Have I? Highever. Castle Highever has stood since the Divine Age, when it was not an independent Banorn, but merely an outpost of the growing Banorn of Amaranthine, in the days before Amaranthine became an Arling itself. The outpost of High Ever was originally held by the Elston family, cousins of the Howes. In the Age of Towers, however, Band Conabar Elston was murdered by his wife, Flemeth. Whoa, that's right, Conabar and Flemeth. Thus ending the bloodline. Conabar's captain of the guard, Sarum Cousland, took the lands and title. The Couslands declared their independence from Amaranthine, starting a war that lasted 30 years. When the dust settled, High Ever was on its own, and in possession of half the land that had once been southwestern Amaranthine. High Ever became a Terranir during the Black Age, when Halia Cousland gathered the lords together under her banner to drive the werewolves out of their lands, earning herself the title of Terrina almost as an afterthought. Today, High Ever is one of the only two remaining Terranirs. I don't know how to pronounce that. Terranirs, making the Cousland family second in rank only to the king. Arl Howe of Amaranthine was named the new Terran of High Ever under somewhat questionable circumstances, and the fate of the Cousland family is now uncertain. From Ferelden, Folklore and History by Sister Patrine, Chantry Scholar. Well, with Howe dead, I wonder if it'll go back to Cousland. The Cousland family. I'm assuming Honora would do that. King Merrick Theron. It is difficult to separate the man from the myth. The last survivor of the bloodline of King Kalanhad, the Silver Knight, Merrick drove the Orlesian forces from Ferelden's borders, reclaimed the throne, and freed our people from foreign tyranny. All true, and all larger than life. He was born in hiding near Cathal's Crossing to the rebel queen Moira. There we go. Moira. Wait. I thought Merrick's wife was the rebel queen. Good grief, I'm confused. So Moira was Merrick's mother. Merrick is Alistair's father, right? Merrick and King Kalan. King Kalan and Alistair's father. I thought that it was Merrick's wife. No, that was Brand. Okay, hang on. Brandel's wife. So Brandel's wife was Merrick's mother. So Merrick was Brandel's son, right? So Moira was the rebel queen. I don't know that we know what was Merrick and what was Kalan and Alistair's mother's name? I think we've heard it before, but I can't recall it. Okay, so Brandel was married to Moira, the rebel queen. They had Merrick. Merrick was married to some lady. Can't remember her name. They had Kalan together. Merrick had an affair with some other lady, whose name we can't remember, and she had Alistair. And Logain was the friend of Merrick. Okay, got it. I think I'm figuring it out. I'm putting together like one of those ancestry trees in my head. Okay, when the rebel queen died, rebel queen Moira, and grew up in the rebel camps, an outlaw in his own country. When the rebel queen died, Merrick inherited her homeless nobles, malcontents, and displaced freeholders, and with the aid of his friend Logain MacTier, built them into an army. After the pivotal Battle of River Dane, Merrick took the throne. He married Rowan. Here we go. Rowan was Kalan's mother. Daughter of Rendorn Garin, Arl of Redcliffe, and began the long, slow process of rebuilding everything Orlais had demolished during 70 years of occupation. From Ferelden, Folklore and History by Sister Patrine, Chantry Scholar. Okay, so the... Hang on. Rowan was the daughter... That's Merrick's wife. She became the queen. Daughter of Rendorn Garin, Arl of Redcliffe. So when did Eamon become Arl of Redcliffe? Eamon Garin. Eamon's descended from Rendorn. Okay. Got it. And Tegan is Eamon's younger brother, is that right? This isn't that important. I'm just trying to keep it all straight in my head. Okay. Parvolan, the occupied north. In the 30th year of the Steel Age, the first Qunari ships were sighted off the coast of Parvolan in the far north, marking the beginning of a new age of warfare. History calls this the First Qunari War, but it was mostly a one-sided bloodbath, with the Qunari advancing far into the mainland. Qunari warriors in glittering steel armor carved through armies with ease. Their cannons, the likes of which our ancestors had never seen, reduced city walls to rubble in a matter of seconds. Stories of Qunari occupation vary greatly. It is said they dismantled families and sent captives to learning camps for indoctrination into their religion. Those who refused to cooperate disappeared to mines or construction camps. For every tale of suffering, however, there is another of enlightenment deriving from something called the Qun. This is either a philosophical code or a written text that governs all aspects of Qunari life, perhaps both. One converted Saharan reported pity for those who refused to embrace the Qun, as if the conquerors had led him to a sort of self-discovery. "For all my life I followed the Maker wherever his path led me," he wrote. "But in the Qun I have found the means to travel my own path." It has been said that the most complete way to wipe out a people is not with blades, but with books. Thankfully, a world that had repelled 4 Blights would not easily bow to a foreign aggressor, and so the exalted marches began. The greatest advantage of the Chantry-led forces was the circle of Magi. For all their technology, Qunari appeared to harbor great hatred for magic. Faced with cannons, the Chantry responded with lightning and balls of fire. The Qunari armies lacked the sheer numbers of humanity. So many were slain at Marnus Pel, on both sides, that the Vale is said to be permanently sundered, the ruins still plagued by restless corpses. But each year the Chantry pushed further and further into the Qunari lines, although local converts to the Qun proved difficult to return to Andrasti's teachings. They were 5th columnists? Interesting. By the end of the Storm Age, the Qunari were truly pushed back. Rivain was the only human land that retained the Qunari religion after being freed, and its rulers attempted to barter a peace. Most human lands signed the Lomarin Accord, accepting the Tevinter Imperium. It is a shaky peace that has lasted to this day. From the Exalted Marches, an examination of Chantry warfare by Sister Petrine, Chantry scholar. Interesting about the Qun, how people who converted to it don't want to convert back. I mean, there's no zealot like a convert, right? So I kind of get it, but you think in one lifetime, if you could go back to your original beliefs, which I would assume you would hold quite strongly, and if you did truly convert just out of convenience, keep yourself alive, why would you not jump at the chance to go back? Unless it truly was a very meaningful conversion for you. Drink of water there, since I've been talking a lot. Let's see. Ben Adal, the Tree of the People. Mostly the old ways are gone. Each generation forgets a little more of the old tongue, a little more of the traditions, and the few things we keep become simple habits, the meaning long since faded. So it is with the Venedal, the Tree of the People. Every alienage has one, I'm told, or they used to. When I was a little girl, my mother told me the tree was a symbol of Arlathan, but not even she knew more. Keeping the Venedal is just a habit now. Many cities have let theirs wither and die, then chop them up for firewood. No great loss. Serethia, Haran of the High Ever Alienage. So is that a giant tree in the Alienage in Denerim that I could walk up to and then interact with, but nothing actually happened? Queen Anora. Oh god, okay. What's new? What's new? It would be... I think we probably read to here. This all looks neat new. She sent her maid, Anora did, Erlina, to Arl Eamon's estate to ask for Georgianne's help in escaping from Arl Howe. But as they fled Howe's estate, Anora in disguise, they were ambushed by Sir Cothrian, there to arrest Howe's murderer. When Georgianne tried to protest the charge on the grounds of defending Anora, rather stupid of Georgianne, but anyway, the queen declared that she was being kidnapped and called on Cothrian for help. A fight ensued, and Anora fled in the confusion. She made her way to Eamon's Denerim estate, and there offered her aid in defeating her father at the Landsmeet. Her efforts, however, were not enough to erode Loghain's support. The bands fell in line behind Loghain, and he called for the warden's execution. Fighting erupted, breaking the long tradition of the Landsmeet, which was ultimately settled with a duel. In the end, Honora was granted the throne, freeing Alistair from the burden of a responsibility he never wanted anyway. Yeah, that was a last-minute thing when Alistair killed Honora's dad, but anyway. So it's interesting because all this time I was thinking, like, okay, the Landsmeet, I'm going to end up having, it's going to end up becoming a conflict with Loghain in the end anyway. But it sounds like if I would have pursued every possible bit of evidence I could have brought to the Landsmeet, all the lords and ladies who sided against me would have possibly sided with me, and I must have not fulfilled the conditions necessary to achieve their win over their support. I think one of them was like ignoring the fact that the one dude's son had murdered a woman or something, and I was like, fuck, I'm gonna leave him in this fucking dungeon. And there were a couple other ones that were like, oh, that's questionable, I don't want to do that. So I don't mind that I didn't get their support, but interesting that it sounds like if I would have done all of that, I could have perhaps avoided a fight entirely. Maybe Loghain would have seen wisdom and realized he had no one on his side. Ser Cothrian, oh, it was fun to kill her. Some of us know what honor and loyalty are. Cothrian came to Loghain's service the hard way. She belonged to a poor family and was out doing work on the farm when she saw a man on horseback being attacked by several bandits. She rushed to his assistance and found out belatedly that the man she saved was none other than the great hero Loghain. Though she was hardly more than a child, he took her in, offering her a position with his soldiers, and she climbed through the ranks through sheer determination. Becoming the commander of Merrick's shield, Loghain's elite soldiers, was the proudest moment of her life. She was slain while trying to stop Georgianne from entering the Landsmeet, as she damn well should have been. Okay, mysterious condition, that one's known. No common ailment, that one's known. His health restored, he called the Landsmeet. Okay. Arliman, we're finishing off his little entry here. Eamon called a Landsmeet with the goal of wresting power from Loghain and placing Alistair on the throne. With the question of the succession settled, Eamon returned to Redcliffe to prepare the castle's defenses for the encroaching Blight. Arl Rendon Howe! Oh, thank you. Thank God for Tim Curry. Okay. I might have already read some of this, but it's Arl Howe, and it's very short, so I'll read it again. It appears it will be civil war after all, despite the darkspawn. Pity. I cannot do a Tim Curry impression. I don't know anybody who can do a good Tim Curry impression, frankly. The Arling of Amaranthine winds along the sinuous northeastern coast of Ferelden. The waking sea is known for its temper, and the storms that sweep in from the warmer northern waters are sudden and brutal. These are the lands of Rendon Howe. He was born during the occupation, and like many of the nobles at the time, joined Prince Merrick's rebels. He fought alongside young Bryce Cousland, future Terran of Highever, and Leonis Bryland, future Arl of Southreach, at the bloody Battle of White River. It was the most catastrophic defeat of the entire occupation, from which only 50 rebel soldiers escaped alive. Although he was decorated for valor by King Merrick, Howe's abrasive manners have earned him almost universal dislike among his peers. Howe died at the hands of Georgianne Denerim, and his last words were, "I deserved more." Loghain MacTair. Ugh. Okay. Let's see. During the Battle of Oscar, he fled. We knew that already. Returned to Denerim, declared himself regent. We knew that already. His action sparked a civil war. Loghain's supporters found themselves fighting their neighbors who blamed Loghain for the death of the king, as well as those who simply wished to take advantage of the power vacuum. He was defeated in single combat at the Landsmeet and summarily executed. Sten, big freaking idiot. Okay. I think this is about the paintings, which is a little weird because we already knew about this, but Sten has an eye for paintings, an appreciation that might seem out of character, but is actually an extension of Qunari discipline. He respects an artist for careful composition, a skill that is as much about where the brush stroke stops as where it begins. Valendrian. Remember that our strength lies in commitment to tradition and to each other. Every alienage has a Haran, an elder. It falls to the Harren to arrange marriages for those without family, to negotiate with the guards when there's trouble, and to act as a sort of mayor and surrogate uncle to the people of the alienage. The title, like so many things, is a holdover from the time of Arlathan, for Harrens are not necessarily the oldest person in their community, or even all that old. Tradition gives the role to the oldest soul, the wisest, cleverest, and the most level-headed. Belendrian has been Harren of the Denerim alienage since he was in his 30s. He was nearly shipped to Tevinter by slavers, but was returned to the alienage by Georgianne. Books and songs. Meditations and odes to bees, okay. O fair damsel of the garden, Arlessa of honeysuckle and rose, I humbly beg your gracious pardon for the offense that here arose. You're rhyming rose with rose, come on, dude. Surely your work is far too vital to be interrupted by one like me. I am in no way entitled to earn the notice of a honey bee. I was a fool to pluck that flower for my lady fair. On my honor, I swear to bring you dozens more within the hour, if you give me leave to try. Ooh, I fucked up the rhythm on that one, didn't I? Listen, traveler, if you would walk the garden paths some spring, mind that you don't trespass, for the gardeners do sting. Anonymous. Yeah, rightly so, dude. I don't really like that poem. Legend of Kalanhad, Chapter 3. Shit, I never found Chapter 1. Well, since this is the last time we're going to read it, let's read Chapter 2, then, without any context for Chapter 1. With the allegiance of Arl Mirrodin, Kalanhad began his rise to greatness. Some of Mirrodin's allies also pledged allegiance, but most thought him foolhardy. A boy commoner was to lead them and become king? Over the years that followed, however, Kalanhad would prove himself worthy of Mirrodin's trust. With each victory, he won over more men to his command, and his reputation as a man of honor spread. Eventually, during his campaign against the lowland Banorn, he met his most infamous friend and companion, the vaunted warrior, Lady Shayna. Kalanhad married the famously beautiful daughter of Mirrodin, Merrin, and his firm belief in the ways of the Chantry became the staple of his court. In a time when the Chantry was still new to the lands and courts following Andraste held the majority of the power in Ferelden. Kalanhad began to solidify the nation as one in line with the other nations around it. This piety eventually won over to Kalanhad those faithful in Ferelden who had been waiting for such a leader. With Lady Shayna at his side, Kalanhad was unstoppable, and by 542 exalted, the war for Ferelden had come down to one final battle against the collected forces of Simeon, Theron of Denerim, and the most potent nobleman in the land. Kalanhad persuaded the Circle of Magi to come to his aid, as well as the Ash Warriors, and in the Battle of White Valley he famously defeated Theron Simeon and united the nation. During the battle, Simeon nearly killed Kalanhad, but Lady Shayna intervened and took the wound for him, slaying Simeon. Kalanhad was crowned king in Denerim that year, with Merrin his queen, but he spent much of the months that followed nursing Lady Shayna back to health. King Kalanhad's Ferelden was peaceful for a time, with the Chantry spreading quickly under the king's guidance. Everywhere the king and queen went, they were surrounded by cheering crowds. The common folk celebrated Kalanhad as one of their own who had achieved the impossible, and trade opened up with many outside lands for the first time in Ferelden's existence. Those are two very, very separate ideas to be included in the same sentence. The common folk celebrated Kalanhad as one of their own. Oh, and also trade opened up with outside lands. I don't know why they put a comma there. Just end the sentence and start a new one. It's kind of funny. But as with many such golden ages, it was not to last. From The Legend of Kalanhad by Brother Heron, Chantry Scribe, 810 Blessed. And now the shocking conclusion to The Legend of Kalanhad. Although we don't know Act 1, so this might not be that shocking at all. Kalanhad's legend tells that Lady Shayna harbored a love for her king that went beyond friendship, a love that she had kept secret out of her sense of duty and honor. When offered a love potion by a witch in disguise, a witch who would later turn out to be the vengeance-seeking sister of Arl Simeon, Lady Shayna gave in to temptation. She used the potion on Kalanhad, but Queen Merrin discovered the two of them together that night, and, broken-hearted, fled Denerim to return to her father. She told Mirrodin everything, and he angrily threatened to revoke his support of Kalanhad and begin anew the civil war. It is said that Lady Shayna felt remorseful at her manipulation of her best friend's heart and confessed her use of forbidden magic to the court. Although her life was forfeit, Kalanhad forgave Lady Shayna for what she had done and refused to have her executed. Myrddin furiously roused the other Arls against Kalanhad and Lady Shayna, and it was not long before Ferelden stood on the brink of civil war once again. Against Kalanhad's orders, Lady Shayna went alone to Merrin to plead for peace and plead her case, only to be found out by Myrddin and slain. Oh no! Angered, but also saddened, Kalanhad challenged Myrddin to an honor duel. Good grief. So his wife's dad killed his best friend, who manipulated him into sleeping with him. Then he challenged his wife's dad to a duel. A fight neither of them wanted, but both knew was necessary, and Myrddin was slain. The death of the king. He killed his wife's husband, or wife's father, just like Alistair almost killed him, or did kill his bride-to-be's father, and ended up calling off the wedding because of it. The death of the king's greatest ally, an important Arl, was too much for the young kingdom to bear. The other Arls would not back down in their claims against Kalanhad. The threat of civil war rose once again. Kalanhad went to his wife one last time then, although none knew what he said to her, and then he simply vanished. He left with Merrin a proclamation abdicating his throne in favor of the son his queen carried in her belly, who eventually ascended to the throne as King Wayland I, the king credited with establishing the Theron dynasty lasting to this day. Kalanhad would never reappear. Sounds all very Arthur and Guinevere and Lancelot, although in this case Lancelot's a lady who wants to sleep with Arthur instead of sleeping with Guinevere, and that's kind of fun. The legend of Kalanhad himself only grew over time, as stories and sightings multiplied, even long after the point when Kalanhad could possibly still be alive. Some say he disappeared into the Qunari wilds, or went to live with the dwarves, or even became a monk in a reclusive Chantry order. The Chantry named Kalanhad one of the Anointed in 788 Storm. Kalanhad's sword, Nemetos, was left with Merrin and became a symbol of Ferelden kingship over the next century. Rumors of its magical powers grew, and when it was lost in the ambush that killed King Venedrin in 824 Blessed, it was seen as a great blow to the Theron line. Several false swords have appeared since that time, but never has the true sword resurfaced. From the Legend of Kalanhad by Brother Heron, Chantry Scribe, 810 Blessed. Something makes it sound like I should have found that sword somewhere over the course of the game, but I didn't. There are a bunch of items that I did not find. 7 of them. Maybe that was one of them. Okay, History of the Chapter, Chapter 3. Okay, again, I don't have Chapter 1. So we'll start with Chapter 2 and just pretend like we know what the hell Chapter 1 was about. When the prophet Andraste and her husband Mafareth arrived at the head of their barbarian horde, southern Tevinter was thrown into chaos. The Imperium had defended against invasions in the past, but now they stood without the protection of their gods, with their army in tatters and their country devastated by the Blight. Many felt that the timing of the invasion was yet another of the Maker's miracles in Andraste's campaign to spread his divine word. Andraste was more than simply the wife of a warlord, after all. She was also the betrothed of the Maker. Enraptured by the melodic sound of her voice as she sang to the heavens for guidance, the Maker himself appeared to Andraste and proposed that she come with him, leaving behind the flawed world of humanity. In her wisdom, Andraste pleaded with the Maker to return to his people and create paradise in the world of men. The Maker agreed, but only if all of the world would turn away from the worship of false gods and accept the Maker's divine commandments. Oh, yeah. All the world? Good luck with that, Maker. Come on, man. Armed with the knowledge of the one true God, Andraste began the exalted march into the weakened Imperium. One of the Maker's commandments, that magic should serve man rather than rule over him, was as honey to the souls of the downtrodden of Tevinter who lived under the thumbs of the Magisters. Word of Andraste's exalted march, of her miracles and military successes, spread far and wide. Those in the Imperium who felt the old gods had abandoned them eagerly listened to the words of the Maker. Those throngs of restless citizens that destroyed temples now did so in the name of the Maker and his prophet Andraste. As Maferath's armies conquered the lands of southern Tevinter, so did Andraste's words conquer hearts. It is said that the Maker smiled on the world at the Battle of Valerian Fields, in which the forces of Maferath challenged and defeated the greatest army Tevinter could muster. The southern reaches of the mighty Imperium now lay at the mercy of barbarians. Faith in the Maker, bolstered by such miracles, threatened to shake the foundations of the Imperium apart. Of course, the human heart is more powerful than the greatest weapon, and when wounded, it is capable of the blackest deeds. We know where this is going. From Tales of the Destruction of Thedas by Berthagen TV, Chantry Scholar. Chapter 3. It is said that at the Battle of Valerian Fields, Maferath stood and looked out over his armies. He had conquered the southern reaches of the greatest empire the world had ever known, and built splintered barbarian clans into a force to be feared. With pride in his heart, he turned to congratulate his men, and found that they had turned from him. Maferath fell to the evil of jealousy. After all that he had done, his wife was the one to receive all the glory. He saw his wife's power and influence, and tired of his place as second husband, below the Maker. His heart swelled with fury. If he had conquered just to have his wife wrested from him by a forgotten god and a legion of faith-hungry rabble, then perhaps this war was not worth the trouble. Here, history and the Chant of Light come apart. History tells us that Maferath looked north into the central Imperium and saw nothing but more war against a rapidly regrouping army, and he despaired. The Chant of Light holds that Maferath chafed with jealousy of the Maker, and jealousy of the glory that Andraste received, although it was he who led the armies. Maferath traveled to the imperial capital of Minrathous to speak with the Archon Hessarian. There he offered up his wife to the Imperium in return for a truce that would end hostilities once and for all. The Archon, eager to put down the voice of the prophet that had stirred his own people against him, agreed. Maferath led Andraste into an ambush where she was captured by Imperial agents, putting an end to her exalted march. Crowds of loyalists stood in the central square of Minrathous to watch Andraste's execution. By command of the Archon, she was burned at the stake in what the Imperium believed to be the most painful punishment imaginable. According to the Chantry, however, Andraste was instead purified and made whole by the flames, ascending to life at her Maker's side. By all accounts, there was only silence where they expected screams. At the sight of the prophet burning, the crowds were filled with a profound guilt, as if they had participated in a great blasphemy. So moving was the moment that the Archon himself drew his sword and thrust it into the prophet's heart, ending her torment and leaving those assembled to consider the weight of what they had seen. Whereas the execution of Andraste was meant to be a symbol of defeat for the faith of the Maker, in truth it all but sealed the fate of the worship of the old gods, and paved the way for the spread of the Maker's chant. From Tales of the Destruction of Thedas by Berthagen TV, Chantry Scholar. Whew, this is going to be a lot of reading. We're 47, 48 minutes in, and oof. Usually these codex entries run right around an hour or so. I think I forgot that I was going to end up having to read all these chapters that I didn't have the first chapter of, so I was going to save them. But now here it's like, well, I got to read them all now, so it's just a whole bunch of information. These are the longest entries in the codex, I think. Chapter 4. The crowds present at the death of Andraste were right to feel despair. It is believed that the prophet's execution angered the Maker, and he turned his back on humanity once more, leaving the people of Thedas to suffer in the dark. In these dark times, mankind scrambled for a light, any light. Some found comfort in demonic cults that yes, that's where you go to find comfort, demonic cults, that promised power and riches in return for worship. Others prayed to the old gods for forgiveness, begging the great dragons to return to the world. Still others fell so low as to worship the Darkspawn, forming vile cults dedicated to the exaltation of evil in its purest form. It is said that the world wept as its people begged for a savior who would not come. Andraste's followers, however, did not abandon her teachings when she died. The cult of Andraste rescued her sacred ashes from the courtyard in Minrathous after her execution, stealing them away to a secret temple. The location of that temple has long been lost, not anymore, But the ashes of Andraste served as a symbol of the enduring nature of the faith in the Maker, that humanity could earn the Maker's forgiveness despite its grievous insult to him. I don't want to get too much into it because I'm sure I have believing Christians amongst my audience. But it's such a strange tendency of religious thought that it's so much abuse, right? It's the abusee's mindset. Like, oh, if only I would have done this right. This person, of course, he wouldn't hit me if I had been good to him all this time. If I'm really, really good to him today, he won't hit me tonight. You know, it's like, I mean, if God is all good and everything, great. That's fantastic. But a God who would be like, they're not worshiping me right, so therefore I'm going to forsake them. And then people having to be like, oh, okay, this time we'll do it right. Please don't forsake us, Lord. Just like, ugh. So pathetic. Just so self-disrespecting, I guess. Bothers me. Anyway. With time, the cult of Andraste spread and grew, and the chant of light took form. Sing this chant in the four corners of Thedas, it was said, and the world would gain the Maker's attention at last. As the chant of light spread, the cult of Andraste became known as the Andrastian Chantry. Those who converted to the Chantry's beliefs found it their mission to spread Andraste's word. There were many converts, including powerful people in the Imperium, and in the city-states of what is now Orlais. Such was the power of the Maker's word that the young King Drakon undertook a series of exalted marches meant to unite the city-states and create an empire solely dedicated to the Maker's will. The Orlesian Empire became the seat of the Chantry's power, the Grand Cathedral in Val Royeaux, the source of the movement that birthed the organized Chantry as we know it today. Drakon, by then Emperor Drakon I, created the Circle of Magi, the Order of Templars, and the Holy Office of the Divine. Many within the Chantry revere him nearly as equal with Andraste herself. The modern Chantry is a thing of faith and beauty, but it is also a house of necessity, protecting Thedas from powerful forces that would do it harm. Where the Grey Wardens protect the world from the Blights, the Chantry protects mankind from itself. Most of all, the Chantry works to earn the Maker's forgiveness, so that one day he will return and transform the world into the paradise it was always meant to be. From Tales of the Destruction of Thedas, by Brother Jenny TV, Chantry Scholar. So the Mafarath and Andraste part of the story reminds me a lot of Muhammad and the original spread of Islam. This bit with Drakon and all that reminds me a bit of Christianity and Constantine. I wonder if that's where the inspirations were drawn from. Feast Day Fish. Fluffy mackerel pudding, 2 stalks celery, 1 green pepper, half a pound of poached mackerel. Poached? Poached meaning gotten illegally from the Lord's property? Or poached meaning boiled in water? 1 small onion, finely diced, 2 tablespoons mustard, 1 tablespoon salt, half tablespoon ground Antivan pepper, 1/8 tablespoon, oh, good grief, who gets down to 1/8 of a tablespoon? Ground mace, dash ground cardamom seed, 2 eggs beaten, 2 eggs boiled and sliced for garnish. This book found in Arl Eamon's estate naturally falls open to this page. I see. It's his favorite meal, I suppose. Alright, now the history of the first Blights, which we do not have the first chapter of, possibly not the 5th chapter, I'm not sure. Chapter 2. People today have little concept of the consequences of the second sin. Oh, believe me when I say that when asked, pious chantry-going folk will curse the use of foul magic, spitting and snapping their fingers, but none live today who actually remember the horror that was unleashed so very long ago. Whatever records might have existed regrettably did not survive the chaos and ignorance that was to follow. We have only the tales of survivors handed down through the murky ages and the dogma of the Chantry to instruct us, and that is precious little indeed. I believe I am not understating when I say that the second sin unleashed the bane of all life upon Thedas. The Darkspawn are more virulent than the worst plague, a heartless force of nature that came into our world like an ill wind. We know from accounts of later Blights, as these Darkspawn invasions came to be called, never has a more appropriate name existed, that the Darkspawn spread disease and famine wherever they tread. The earth itself is corrupted by their presence, the sky roiling with angry black clouds. I do not exaggerate, my friends, when I say that a mass gathering of Darkspawn is an omen of dread cataclysm. It is said that those cursed magisters who became the first Darkspawn scratched at the very earth to find solace in the darkness of the dwarven deep roads, and there in the shadows they multiplied, whether by intelligent design or by some last vestige of worship in their minds. They attempted to locate the old gods they had once served. They found what they sought, Dumat, first among the old gods, once known as the Dragon of Silence before the Maker imprisoned him and all his brethren beneath the earth, for the first sin, usurping the Maker's place in mankind's heart. The slumbering dragon awoke, freed from the Maker's prison by his twisted followers, and became corrupted himself. Dumat was transformed into the first archdemon, his great and terrible power given will by a rotting, unholy mind. With the Darkspawn horde following, Dumat rose and took wing in the skies once again, bringing ruin to the world the Maker had created. The old god had become the eye of a dark storm that would ravage the entire world. From Tales of the Destruction of Thedas by Brother Genetivi, Chantry Scholar. Chapter 3. The world during the First Blight was different from the world we know today. Aside from the civilized rule of the Imperium, humans as a race were largely barbarous and splintered, divided into clans and tribes and squabbling amongst ourselves for resources. At the same time, deep beneath Thedas' great mountain ranges spanned a dwarven culture as organized and advanced as ours was primitive. As the Darkspawn bubbled up to the surface from their underground lairs, mankind first buckled and then fought back. The armies of Tevinter attempted to face down the multitudes of twisted creatures and the horrid rotting of the land around them, but they could not be everywhere at once. Human history remembers the First Blight as a time of terrible devastation, and those stories are accurate, but in our arrogance we often forgot the price paid by the dwarves and their isolated mountain kingdoms. The dwarves faced far greater hordes than humanity as the Darkspawn challenged them for control of the underground. Despite the might and technology the dwarves brought to bear, the savage Darkspawn tore through them, first destroying the more remote tags before swallowing up entire kingdoms. Think of it, an entire civilization lost in the space of decades. Compared to the near genocide that the dwarves faced, what we humans call the First Blight must have seemed a mere skirmish. Against the Darkspawn, the dwarven lands have always borne the brunt of the fighting, and the majority of the sacrifices. 4 dwarven kingdoms finally managed to combine their might and fight back, and that cooperation saved them. But for the rest of their lands it was too late. The Darkspawn had taken the deep roads, the majestic underground passages that linked the dwarven lands throughout Thedas. The Darkspawn could now attack anywhere on the surface through these tunnels. Humanity simply was not prepared for such an onslaught. It was clear that the warfare we knew would not avail us. We had to find a new way to fight. Thus came our salvation. The Grey Wardens were born. From blah 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 blah. Chapter 4. Okay, hang on. I need a drink of water here. Whew. Founded in Weishaupt Fortress. Actually, I think if it's German, it'd be Weishaupt Fortress in the Anderfels. The Grey Wardens offered humanity hope in its darkest hour. Veterans of decades of battles with the Darkspawn came together, and the best amongst them pledged to do whatever was necessary to stem the tide of darkness that swept across the land. These great humans, elves and dwarves, pooled their knowledge of the enemy and formed a united front to put a stop to the Archdemon's rampage. And stop it they did. Ballads are still sung today of the first Grey Warden charge into the waves of Darkspawn at the city of Nordbotten, each warden facing 10 or 20 Darkspawn at a time. Squadrons of Grey Wardens mounted on their mighty griffins, soaring through the blackened skies and battling the terrible Archdemon with spear and spell. Oh, what a sight it must have been! Incredibly, the Grey Wardens won that first battle. They raised their arms in victory, and suddenly there was hope. The Grey Wardens led the lands of men and the last stalwart defenders of the dwarven halls against the hordes of the archdemon Dumat for the next 100 years, gaining and losing ground, but never backing away. From all over Thedas, they recruited whoever possessed the skill and strength to raise the Grey Warden's banner, making no distinction between elven slave or human noblewoman. And finally, nearly 2 centuries after the first old god rose from the earth, the Grey Wardens assembled the armies of men and dwarves at the Battle of Silent Fields. It was then that Dumat finally fell, and the first Blight ended. The Tevinter Imperium would face a new challenge with the coming of the prophet Andraste. Thoughts of the Blight grew distant. With Dumat's defeat, the Darkspawn were no longer considered a threat, but with the wisdom of hindsight, we know that conceit proved foolish indeed. The task of the Grey Wardens was far from over. Good old Brother Jaden TV wrote that one. Whew, okay. Spell combinations. What did we learn? Shattering. A creature frozen or petrified by magic, as from the spells Petrify or Cone of Cold, is in a vulnerable state, subject to shattering if excessive force is applied to just the right spot. A critical hit from any weapon may suffice, and the spells Stone Fist and Crushing Prison have been known to achieve the effect as well. Okay, that's good to know. I didn't... Shows you how little I used my mages effectively. I only learned Improved Drain, and which I still don't ever use. And Shattering. Controls? Why do I have controls? Disguised! Exclamation point. Disguises will allow you to pass by most guards without being attacked. However, many actions that draw attention, such as talking to ranking officers or attacking someone, will blow your cover. Your disguise will be removed if you enter combat. You can also choose to remove it by speaking to whoever gave you the costume. Yeah, our disguises did not last very long, did they? Whew, okay. That was a lot. Oh, but we're just above an hour in terms of time. That's fine. I'm not upset with that. All right, everybody. The very next episode will be returning to gameplay. We'll be going to visit Arleman and Redcliffe. Thanks very much for sitting through all that. I hope you enjoyed it. That was, as I said, the last Codex entry, so everything that's currently unknown in the Codex will remain unread in this Let's Play. Here we go. Next episode.